So, I've always had a complicated relationship with metal music. It's some of the earliest stuff that I really got behind when I was younger, particularly the new metal and new wave of American heavy metal in the early 2000s. But I've always had difficulty getting into extreme metal. Death metal took me many years to get into, and even then, I wouldn't say that I'm a genre fan. I'm a fan of certain albums, certain bands, and that's about it. It is a very uncompromising genre that intentionally makes moves to turn away casual listeners. Everything from the tones they use to even the album artwork with logos that are unreadable are meant to keep the fan base insular and breed a certain extremism. It is extreme music, after all. So it's a very rare case where I find a death metal record that I can really get behind. And some people will justifiably say that Zeal and Ardor are not a death metal band, since they show some semblance of variety, accessibility, and pop structure. Or maybe it's the fact that they have a gimmick. They are a band that fuse the atmospheric qualities of black metal with African American spiritual music. So it might be more accurate to call them a folk metal band, but I think that that genre has very little consistency to style, since folk music in and of itself varies incredibly from culture to culture. Even amongst the folk bands that pull from American roots music, there's a vast amount of variety. You get stuff like Panopticon that chooses to take more atmospheric metal and combine it with bluegrass, or maybe a band like Fair to Midland that use American colloquialisms as the foundation of their lyrical content. But what I think Zeal and Ardor bring to the table that these other acts don't is an examination of what influences birthed metal in the first place. You look at Black Sabbath and you see a band that were taking blues music, a very African American medium, and distorting it and playing with texture to make it sound darker and more sinister. And so Zeal and Ardor have really extrapolated that potent combination out. Instead of the blues, they've gone further back to the sounds of chain gang and just vocal spirituals, slave music, and they've taken the spiritual aspect of that music and they've turned it on its head. This is still music that's very much about suffering and overcoming, but instead of a coming to and worship of God, it is a turning away from and an embrace of the violent chaos of the world and of punishment and retribution. On top of that, they've taken the sort of atmospheric tones that Sabbath were playing with and taken those into the modern age, because what is black metal other than some of the most textural metal music that you can get? Metal without its neoclassical influences, that's not interested particularly in coming up with clever riffs, but just letting a wash of distortion fill the space. And so on Stranger Fruit, Zeal and Ardor take this style and show what they can do with it and how they can take that style and make it sound strangely and compellingly comprehensive, as if these very desperate influences belong together all along. One of the biggest advantages I think that this record has over other folk metal and extreme metal albums is a thoughtful track order. As I said earlier, extreme metal music tends to intentionally off-put the listener, but the first two tracks off of Stranger Fruit do the opposite. Intro and Gravedigger's Chant are songs that don't feature screaming or an extreme metal presence, while still giving this very atmospheric and ominous tone through both the music and especially the lyrics. Both tracks have themes of desperation, death, and inevitability looming over them, but it's not really until the third song, Servants, kicks in that the band really unleash the brutal stylings that they're known for. And in that way, sort of lure the listener into the album before really playing all of their cards. Another advantage of the track listing here is Zeal and Ardor's use of instrumental tracks to break up the monotony of the record. On a lot of metal releases, there's just a relentless flow from one brutal track to another, but here these instrumentals act as punctuation from the tedium that could build up from such a release, as well as being kind of landmarks to orient yourself on repeat listens. Another great strength that this record has is the track lengths themselves. Most of these songs are less than 4 minutes long. Plenty of them are under 3 minutes long. And I think that keeps things pretty breakneck and keeps them from being stale. A lot of these ideas don't need a lot of time to gestate or repeat themselves to be effective. And often the vocal performances are very repetitive. As I mentioned, there's sort of a chain gang element to a lot of these things. A lot of them are chants or things that are meant to be repeated with call and response. So lyrically, not many of the songs have a lot of different lyrics. And so the short track lengths really keep those from getting stale quick and keep them effective and memorable. And the lyrics themselves have a great consistency to them throughout the record as well. Not only are there the usual topics of death and a turning away from God and embrace of the devil that are common to metal music, there is a lot of references to natural elements throughout the record. Fire, water, wind, earth. You know, if we just added heart in here, we'd have all the fucking Planeteers and we'd be able to summon Captain Planet. But there is this repeating theme of the natural elements that binds a lot of these songs together and helps keep things very, consistent lyrically throughout. There seems to be a vibe and a purpose here, and if you look at the lyrics, there's a lot of things that you'll see repeated throughout the track list. It's consistent. It's well thought out. And another thing about the chanting aspect of the lyrics, that's something that I think will translate very well to a live audience. I'm actually going to see them out on tour soon, and we'll see how that pans out. But the repetition makes it easy to memorize the songs. It makes it easy for audience participation to happen. And dare I say, that's good pop songwriting. So while they may turn off a lot of purists and metalheads, I find all of this to be refreshing and a calculated effort by the band to make something that's not only a statement of purpose as an album, but also a classic release. This feels more than just a good metal record. It's good based on its execution of fundamental songwriting and not just the fact that it's here to make a lot of disgusting noise, and dear God, does it do that too. So, if you like metal, I say you check it out. If you have a passing interest in getting into metal, this might be a good way to get into the more extreme side of it. And I think it's really more than the sum of its parts. This record could have easily just rested on the shtick of what it is, the combination of blues and metal, but they really seem to have gone the extra mile in integrating these two sounds, and it's been a fantastic release. Anyway, thanks for listening to my opinions on this record, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.